Hi, welcome back to Ecole Holt Couture. I'm Jutta Holtkamp, and I'm sitting in the studio here at Ecole Holt Couture. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about a question that we often get, and that is about pattern drafting and how do we teach pattern drafting. And do we use computer-assisted drafting, and what kind of special tools do we use? Well, we use our hands. That's what we use. We don't use computer-assisted drafting. And we don't use special tools either. We have a right angle triangle, we have a measuring tape, pencil, and paper, and a set of measurements, of course. But I want to explain to you a little bit about the different terms that are used to create patterns in our definition. And how do we do pattern making here? Do we use ready-made patterns? And we don't. We actually create all of our patterns by hand. We create them from scratch, from a set of measurements that we take from our clients. And we do what we call flat pattern drafting. We don't use computer-assisted drafting. Do we ever do draping? Yes, we do, but that's not the initial way that we teach how to pattern draft. So I'm just going to explain quickly what the differences between draping and pattern drafting is in our definition. So draping, it's often called modeling, and it's the pattern cutting method used by a lot of designers. So that's where shapes are modeled on a body form or a mannequin, and the approach to it is either literally by draping fabric on there or by sectioning off the mannequin using tape or pins or whatever method. And then that information is transferred onto paper to create a pattern. Draping is quite literally just draping fabric on your mannequin or to a body form. And that enables you to develop a design freely using the fabric that you intend to use. And we actually do use this in some instances where we are testing the fabric to see how it would look best pattern-wise, drape-wise, and so forth. Now, flat pattern drafting is what we teach basically from the beginning before we get into the other draping or modeling. So flat pattern drafting is hand-drawn on paper, and it is used to interpret the design that has been sketched. Okay, so the advantages of each one. Now, the advantages of creating patterns by modeling is that the creator can make a pattern without any formal training, or in the case of a trained pattern maker, a new silhouette can be tested on the form before being drafted. So the disadvantage is that draping on a form is limited to the form's shape itself, so whatever mannequin you have. So true draping, now this is draping, is very successful in creating designs and shapes which are asymmetrically balanced or unusual in form, and you cannot visualize them very successfully. The advantage is that a designer can create with muslin or the actual fabric using its individual characteristics with new ideas, and ideas may emerge in the process. The only disadvantage of using this method is that the designer has to be very experienced in handling the various fabrics and in pattern manipulation before you can use this method effectively and efficiently. But the advantage of flat pattern drafting is that the designer who understands body forms in 3D, and that's what we teach too, and is technically proficient in this method, you can draft patterns to varying styles and designs to custom measurements. And that's where the big difference lies. Also, historical fashion patterns, which are well documented in all sorts of publications, they're just tiny little drawings, and they don't necessarily have expansion techniques for them, but you can look at it and reinterpret that in full scale. So as students at Ecole Holt Couture learn the techniques to create uniquely fitted and crafted garments, the method that we use is flat pattern making. First on paper to learn how to interpret and draft given designs. During the program, students also use various forms of draping to experiment with shapes and forms to help them visualize the elements of their design. In the advanced portion of the program, draping is used to create unusual shapes and connections, to fitted underlayers and underpinning, to experiment with tucking, pleating, pinching, looping, layering, you name it. And the fabric is actually sewn onto the fitted underlayer in the desired configuration. So you're actually got a base layer that you're sewing your finished fabric on while you are sewing the finished product on. So ultimately, students will employ freestyle draping, that's freestyle draping I just talked about, to create a completely unique garment in which no traditional placement of seams or darts or elements apply. So the secret to success of such a garment often lays in the understanding and clever use of underpinning or support techniques. So basically, we use all three methods, but we concentrate on the hand-drawn pattern drafting. And right now, our students are, let's see, in the certificate program, we are into the second to last term of the program. And we've only just now started to introduce draping as an aid to pattern drafting. And the reason that we use this is because the design or the project that we're working on right now is a little bit more complicated, a little bit different than what has been done so far. And to practice with fabric on the mannequin helps to understand the odd looking shapes that you end up with in your pattern draft. So in our class last week, that's what we were doing. We were just practicing or getting the students to practice on mannequins to design a multi-piece bodice for a strapless gown. And we'd gone through the process and we followed the lines and we cut it out and we looked at the pieces. And then we did the flat pattern drafting. And what looked like an absolute nightmare at the beginning, when they went through this process, they looked at the pattern and drafts and said, oh, yes, I get it. I understand. Yes, I recognize those pieces. So we use different methods to teach pattern drafting. And it is so important to be able to interpret the measurements and apply them to a specific design, and particularly in couture, because everybody's shape is different. We are not the shape of a mannequin that you can buy. It's great having a mannequin, it is. But how many of us actually have that shape? Very few. And all of these measurements, these 60 measurements in total, have to conform to the design that we are designing for the client. So I hope that's helped to clarify a little bit the differences between pattern drafting and draping and modeling. And to clarify, we don't use computer-assisted drafting, and we don't use complicated tools for drafting. We basically have a pencil, a measuring tape, paper, a triangle square, and a ruler, and that's it. We don't use any special tools. Everything else that's done is done freehand. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. So subscribe and even press the little bell if you want the latest updates. So thanks for joining us, and see you again soon.